plains and the hills of this land. You are strong. You are bold. You are home. All right. Welcome home. This is where your story starts. Eastern Cape, yours to explore.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good morning, Africa. Good morning. Good morning, Commonwealth Parliamentary Associate members that have been connected already by now. Bonjour. Asante sana. We are going now to flight the program so that each and everyone can be in a position to see how is it going to flow. But let me indicate that we are going to receive our Africa national anthem. But just before that, may I request that everybody mute the mic. Please do so as I'm saying, and mute your videos just for your bandwidth and connectivity. And immediately you do so, ensure that you keep your mic mute up until we recognize you if you want to speak during the time of discussions. We are now going to receive the Africa National Anthem. Let us all be attentive. Now we are going to receive our national anthem, Nkosi Sikelel' iAfrika. Please be observant. Be observant. Be observant. Be observant. Okay. Play, guys. Because this program is not going to be long at all, but it is very much important. Let me then now greet the President of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, who is also the Honorable Speaker of the Legislature. Just before I can delve into a program, I will request the technical team to flight the program. Let me just quickly indicate that, Honorable President, I just want to state that this institution is quite unique and remarkable. And during the period of 2020 to 2022, the Eastern Cape CPA, which is Eastern Cape Provincial Legislature, hosted already 3 webinars under the auspices of CPA that each had a specific focus area in relation to global challenges identified as priority area during 2019 CPA Regional and International Conference. The first webinar that was held in 2020 sought to tackle the concept of people's democracy and human rights in the context of COVID-19 and gender-based violence. And then this webinar is going to look into the resolutions that were taken and that must be implemented by the government. And in the following year, 2021, another webinar was hosted, and that looked at linking the urbanization management efforts of different role players towards sustainable urban spaces. And the last webinar, Honorable President, sought to tackle the effects of climate change to the humankind and the environment, was also hosted last year in May. And despite the progressive deliberations and informative sessions that were held through the above-mentioned webinars, the question then now still stands as to what are the tangible results yielding through the implementation of the resolution. And I think that is the crux of today's webinar. And of course, that is the crux of why are we commemorating this day, so that we can track and see the capacity of the implementation of the decisions that we are taking. I will now, after we have managed to see the digital excursion, trying to show what Eastern Cape is able to showcase. We have received both our national anthem, the Continental, as well as the branch national anthem, South Africa. I will now request and invite the president of our sub-branch CPA, who is also the Speaker of Eastern Cape, Honorable Ms. H. Souls-August, that is Ms. Helen Souls-August, to welcome everybody and setting the scene for this important day in Africa. Thank you very much, ma'am, and over to you.
Speaker, as well as the chairperson of the session and the chairperson of the CPA Eastern Cape sub-branch. Firstly, let me acknowledge the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, the Vice President of the CPA sub-branch,
Honourable Premier,
the
Chairperson of the CPA Eastern Cape sub-branch, Honourable Kobishiane, the Deputy Minister from the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, representatives from the institutions of higher learning, regional representatives from UN Habitat, Mr. Sila and other guests that are with him, our own members of the executive committee that have joined us today, our Chief Whip and Deputy Chief Whip and all honourable members from the Eastern Cape provincial legislatures, all councillors that have joined us from the length and breadth of the Eastern Cape, all invited guests, the media, the staff that is gathered here today, distinguished guests, Molweni Nonke. Program Director, it gives me immense pleasure that we converge here once again under the umbrella of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association program to celebrate Africa Day. The participation of African countries in the Commonwealth Association and subsequent celebration of Africa on the Commonwealth program means that the African continent is reawakening and reclaiming its lost glory amongst the community of nations in the world. This, despite the historic injustices which were unleashed by some founding countries of the Commonwealth on our African countries. The fact that African countries were able to reconcile with our past injustices to shape a better future for the continent and the world is indeed, Chairperson, a revolutionary act. Distinguished guests, as you are all aware that this month we are commemorating the establishment of the Organization of African Union, which has since been known as the African Union. In establishing the OAA, the African continent pioneered the maintenance of African unity and peace among African countries and encouraged nation building through unity and freedom from oppression. Our participation in the CPA program is intended at promoting the advancement of parliamentary democracy by enhancing knowledge and understanding of the democratic governance in Africa. The Eastern Cape Provincial Legislature is an active affiliate member and sub-branch of the CPA and duly participates in its programs, which adopts resolutions to be implemented by the sub-branch. In this regard, as the Honourable Chairperson has already stated, we have hosted a number of webinars which has had specific focus in relation to global challenges identified as a priority area in the CPA. As part of our implementing some of the resolutions of the CPA, we have adopted some of the key resolutions in the legislature. Some of the webinars focused on tackling the concept of people's democracy and human rights in the context of COVID-19 and gender-based violence. The legislative sector and its capacity to discharge its responsibility within the context of prevailing social challenges requires us to have self-introspection and evaluation of our commitment and capacity to use our mandate in a respective constituencies. It is demanding for us as the Eastern Cape Provincial Legislature sub-branch, therefore, to do the self-introspection, because we have committed ourselves to being an activist parliament that is responsive to the citizens' needs. It is against this background that we, as the executive of the sub-branch, decided that this year's webinar should take stock of our progress that have been made in implementing the resolutions we took in all the previous webinars. It is critical for the Executive Committee to assess progress made in implementing resolutions taken therefore in the previous years as we build towards the end of our sixth term. The Executive Committee of the Eastern Cape Provincial Legislature and the CPA Eastern Cape Sub-Branch therefore welcomes all of you across the different platforms to this extraordinary event, celebrating an even bigger achievement in the history of the African continent, the founding of the Organization of African Unity, known as Africa Day. Nkosi kakule, baie dankie. Thank you so much.
At an appropriate time, and there are guests across the African continent. Young people are connected here, leaders, as you have indicated, Honorable Speaker, our traditional leaders in the province, but such will be done correctly by the Honorable Member, Ms. Mbonyana. I will indicate, Honorable Member, when you are to do so. But just to amplify, thank you very much, Madam President. This indeed is the high level of accountability, especially among leaders. And because if we are doing so, it's going to create a public trust. And also knowing that leaders must take responsibility for their own decisions and instill a high level of confidence among public members. And I think it's going also to help governments to stay on track to achieve the results. And hence this webinar is going to look at to what is it that we have done over the period of time. I will now invite Honorable Mbonyana, who is the member of the CPA Sub-Branch Eastern Cape, also the MPL in the provincial legislature, to present our presenters. And we will also further amplify that by indicating who else is present here by way of acknowledgements. May I invite you, ma'am, just to present our speakers. Over to you, Honorable Mbonyana. I hope the sign language is also effective. Thank you.
It is my great honor and a pleasure to introduce the following esteemed speakers who have vast experience in different fields and highly qualified. Honorable members, it is a great honor to present to you the first speaker, the Deputy Speaker of National Assembly, Tadeli Chisa Sinodi, who was re-elected Deputy Speaker of National Assembly in the 6th administration of the Republic of South Africa in 2019. He is currently serving a second term as the Deputy Speaker of National Assembly. Tadeli Chisa has more than 25 years as a public representative, including roles in both legislative sector and the executive. He is a graduate of the international program of the Jalstad Institute of Cleveland on Organization and Systems Development. The second person, honorable members, that I'm going to present to you is Deputy Minister Makgotso Meki Soju. Deputy Minister, honorable members, is the Deputy Minister in the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment in the Republic of South Africa. Makgotso, honorable members, joined the National Assembly in 1999. She possessed a vast experience and served in many committees of Parliament. The next person, honorable members, is Mamu Nwanceba Kontsiwe. Mamu Kontsiwe is a newly appointed member of the Executive Council for Department of Sport, Recreation, Arts and Culture in the Eastern Cape. Mamu Kontsiwe is in possession of a BA degree in Social Science and higher diploma in education, both from the University of Fort Hare. She further obtained a certificate in economic development and labor practice from the University of Western Cape in 2009, and a certificate in economic development and policy from Wits University in 2021. She is currently studying towards a master's degree in public administration in the University of Fort Hare. Mamu Kontsiwe, honorable members, political interest was awakened by the events of 1976. She was sharpened in the trade union environment. She is one of the founding members of NEHAWU in 1987. She has occupied many leadership roles while she was the NEHAWU shop steward, which include being NEHAWU provincial general coordinator later in the years. MEC Kontsiwe, honorable members, was elected as the provincial treasurer of COSATU, a position she served for 2 terms until she became a member of the provincial legislature in 2014. The next person, honorable members, is Uma Sila, an acting director, Africa General Office, UN Habitat. Mr. Uma, honorable members, has more than 20 years of academic and practical experience in land, natural resources, conflict resolution, urban development, regional cooperation, and partnership. Prior being appointed as acting director for the Regional Office for Africa, Uma was coordinator of urban legislation, land and governance branch within UN Habitat. As the leader of the land and GLTN unit, Uma has led efforts towards improving tenure security for the vulnerable through the expansion of GLTN's work at the country's level, advocating in the overall SDGs agenda towards bridging the gap between rural and urban land nexus, and to build a strong partnership and land governance. The land partnership, the land and GNLT unit is also supporting tools implementing at a country's level to support land administration and policy development. The next person, honorable members, is Professor Sitekula Mbanga, PhD and Associate Professor and Program Leader for Human Settlement Studies. Professor Mbanga, honorable members, is a member of Research Group on Environmental Stewardship and Sustainable Livelihoods and the Chair for Sustainable Human Settlement on the Nelson Mandela at the Nelson Mandela University. He currently serves in the editorial board of the Urban Forum Journal that is hosted by the University of Cape Town, in University Study academic and engagement committees and South African National Government Advisory Committees, including the DSI/CSIR Advisory Committee on Science and Technology, Innovations for Sustainable Human Settlement, South African Reference Group on the New Urban Agenda, the South African Sweden University Forum and Advisory Committee on Urbanization and the 21st Century Cities, the NHRU_USA International Housing Research and Exchange Forum, the World Bank Inclusive Development Network, and the Society for Housing Professionals in Africa. The next person, honorable members, which is the second last, the director of the Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation, as well as International Relations and Political Studies. Professor Samantha Zundi, honorable members, is the director of the Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation, one of the University of Johannesburg Global Excellence and Stature Flagship Institute. He also leads the Joint Institute for Global Africa Affairs, which is a is in partnership with the University of West Indies. Professor Zondi holds a PhD in African Studies from the University of Cambridge. He has 22 years of experience in the research environment from his position as a researcher on SADC integration and liberation movement of the African Institute for South Africa in 2001, and his position as a head of the Institute for Global Dialogue between 2010 and 2016. The last person, honorable members, is Professor Pichegro, an acting director of the Coastal and Marine Research Institute in Nelson Mandela. I'm told, Prof, that there's a relationship between the global change and the decrease in terms of numbers of penguins in Africa. Honorable members, Professor Pichegro has been studying the impacts of anthropogenic changes and conservation measures on African penguin and other seabirds in South Africa for the past 15 years. Professor Pichegro, honorable members, works closely with the governmental institutions, NGOs, and civil society to improve the conservation of these charismatic species. Honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our speakers. The legislature much appreciates your participation and bestowing us with your presence. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mbonyana, for such a very eloquent and quite a pointed presentation and introduction of our key panelists that are going to walk us through the webinar today. But just in addition to the list, may I therefore acknowledge the presence of the following esteemed guests. And I want to say your presence, honorable members and community, signals the importance of this webinar in all sectors of our society. May I therefore acknowledge the CPA Regional Secretariat, Tanzania headquarters. I'm informed that you are also present in the province of the Eastern Cape in South Africa. The diaspora, Africa diaspora, represented by Ghana, Somalia, and Nigeria, all of them are present in this webinar, led by Mr. Abdul Alutunji, who is the General Secretary of Community of African Nations in South Africa, which is CANISA. Members of Parliament, I have seen some already. They've already connected, Honorable Mkiva and the entire group that represent us at national level. Let me take this selective and singular honor of welcoming our honorable speakers of provincial legislatures, and thank you for your participation and connection in this webinar. The members of the Executive Council, I'm informed, Honorable Consul, that you are leading the delegation, and you will be also representing the Vice President to deliver the talk in this important session. Chief Gwadiso, the chairperson of the House of Traditional Leaders, representing the entirety of our kings and queens as well as traditional leaders of the province, and the Hoy and the Sen leader who is present here, members of the provincial legislature. Without you, this webinar is nothing. We are welcoming you also, honored members, and acknowledging your presence here. There are mayors, there are speakers, honorable president, and chief whips that are here from metros, district, and local municipalities, and as well as heads of departments and heads of agencies, institutions of higher learning, organization representing designated groups are also present, the business fraternity, civil society, and labor organizations. I'm taking this opportunity to add to the list of participants and attendees in this important webinar. But let me conclude by indicating that there will be part of discussions, and when we are entertaining that part, we will be requesting members that are going to discuss, that have already been briefed about their task. The Secretary General Abdul Alatunji will be representing the Community of Nations in South Africa. Dr. Nana Kwame Ando from Ghana, Mr. Dino Mohammed from Somalia representative, Ms. Lizelle Morris, the Executive Director, Border Kai Chamber of Business, and Mr. Wongama Tengela, the remote sensing scientist from Krisani Ekomani, Honorable Thingo, the Mayor of Port St. John's, Honorable P. Ndamase, Pumelele Ndamase, who will be representing the economic perspective, who is also the member of the provincial legislature, and Honorable Luana will be representing the traditional affairs and cooperative governance. So their minutes will be indicated when they are about to take the podium, but they'll be part of the discussion. President and Vice President Rep, let's move. I will now invite Professor Zondi, who have been well presented and introduced, the Director for the Department of Politics and International Relations. He will be introducing the webinar and its significance, especially the three topics that have been identified. Deputy Speaker of National, we are aware that you are leading the delegation from Parliament, the RSA, also the 9 provincial legislatures, Lesotho, Swaziland, and Namibia, which is Southern Africa, is all in your shoulders this morning. We're very much proud and filled with gratitude that you have managed to come and be present here. My Prof, good morning, and you are invited to take the podium. Thank you once again to have you in this webinar. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Speaker of the Legislature, Eastern Cape, and thanks very much to the Speaker for warmly welcoming us here and setting the scene very excellently. And thank you very much to the honorables and excellencies and fellow Africans. A good morning from the chilly Gauteng province up north. It is actually a single honor to have been part of these conversations and these webinars on a yearly basis for several years now. And I have been left with nothing but great hope and inspiration from the nature of the conversations that have been had, and just how candid these conversations have been, just how enlightening the perspectives that are allowed to be shared in these conversations that we have here. And I have no doubt that this seminar will also help us navigate a very difficult terrain in relation to implementation of the goals that we set ourselves. I must just say that none of our discussions have any meaning unless they relate to the overall perspective and overall goals, overall dreams, overall plans that we are all working toward. None of what we do is meaningful unless it fits, in the case of South Africa, to the National Development Plan, which is the guiding vision that is giving cohesion, giving direction towards the entirety of government at all levels is doing. Principally because the National Development Plan is a vision adopted in 2012, which was to bring about an age-old goal of the new South Africa, which is best expressed in a phrase which says a better life for all. It is not about a better audit. It's not about the better policies. It's not about better talk, but it is about a better life for the people on the ground, because that is what Africans believe liberation means. The second one is the SADC Regional Indicative Strategic Plan. And that is what we as South Africa and 16 members of SADC have signed up to as our vision for change. Central to that, as it is with an NDP, is to see change in the quality of lives of the people of Southern Africa. It is not simply to establish a nicer looking SADC or a better sounding policy framework at SADC or a greater voice for SADC, but it is to improve the quality of life of the people in this huge region, which is one of the biggest blocks in economic terms in the world, that if it functioned more coherently, it would be challenging the top 20 economies of the world, simply because it has about 500 million people. It has over 28 precious minerals. It has natural landscape. It has beautiful wildlife. It has very great and skilled people. It has a majority, about 68% population between the age of 16 and 35. It has everything going for it, yet the region remains poor. And the third one, none of what we do in these areas that we've listed, climate change, urbanization, urban development and human settlement, COVID and democracy and governance, ICT participation, women participation in it. None of those are meaningful unless they are linked to the Agenda 2063 of the African Union, also adopted about 8 years ago, to guide the aspirations of the African continent and place the aspirations of ordinary Africans at the center of what governments are doing at the African Union level. And these aspirations are simple aspirations that are about a better Africa in 2063 than an Africa that was there in 2013. And these aspirations talk to aspirations that are in the NDP in South Africa, in the SADC RSDP, but also in Iraq. And these aspirations are include, among other things, and key among them is inclusive growth and sustainable development, and includes integrated continent that is able to function effectively, include good governance that pursues the ideas of Pan-Africanism, ensuring that people are at the center of pursuing this goal, including freeing parts of the continent that remains under colonial rule, like the Chagos Island of the coast of Mauritius, which remains occupied by United States, ceded to it by the United Kingdom, unfair. Which is about a peaceful Africa. It's about actualizing our cultural identity. It's about empowering those that are on the sideline, including women, children, and all of that. It's about building a resilient Africa and all of that. So unless all that we do relates to these overarching dreams and goals for Pan-Africanism, we will maybe actually be simply doing a good stuff, but that doesn't contribute to a more sustainable future for all of us. The African sayings goes that it is not a snake you see that is a danger to you, but it is the one you don't see. It is the things we are not aware of that creates problems for us. So even if we pursue all these changes that we are pursuing, all these projects we are pursuing, we have to remember that. Another one, which is a saying of the Atete people of Lake Turkana, the Turkana people of Lake Turkana in the south of Sudan, north of Kenya, it says, however long a log of wood stay underwater, it just does not become a crocodile. However long you pursue something, unless you aim to transform society for better, it will just be good plans. It will just be good intentions. It will just be good resolutions. It will just be good intentions, but it will not cause a change unless it relates to changing the lives of the people on the ground. And in pursuit of all these very beautiful resolutions in relation to climate change, in relation to urbanization, in relation to COVID and democratization, in relation to ICT participation, in relation to women participation, all of them have a potential, if implemented fully, to change the lives of people on the ground and contribute to changing the whole of Africa. Because South Africa will not succeed unless Africa succeeds. South Africa depends on trade with the African continent for a significant amount of its trade and its investment. South Africa depends on access to the African market to get its produces exported, including in motor vehicles, including in in manufactured fabrics, including in manufactured machinery, including in manufactured chemicals and all that. It needs an African continent that functions well for it to do that. South African ICT companies dominate the African market, and the African market is where South Africa makes a lot of trade. The most stable, the most assured market for any of our goods is the African continent. If you didn't believe it, think about the citrus fruits in the Southern Cape and in the Eastern Cape also, southern part of the Eastern Cape, as case Kama. Their trade, our trade in the citrus with the EU is a huge trade, makes a lot of money, but it is not assured. Just in the past 5 years, the EU has been troubling us about spots on our citrus fruit and making a huge meal about it and frustrating us and almost stopping all that trade worth billions. So the EU can change its mind anytime, but it seems Africa will not change its mind about what it needs from us and what we need from Africa, because our relationship with Africa is not transactional one about what's good for me, what's good for you, but it's about our shared aspiration to prosper together. So that is very, very important. And therefore, I want to end by saying that the efforts that are being made to improve our response to climate change in order to save our water capacity and water supply, in order to save our agricultural production that is very vulnerable to climate change, in order to save people from diseases linked to climate change, such as the breakout of cholera just recently, and the return of typhus virus last year in KZN, and others. The efforts we made towards improving urbanization in order to ensure that there is a more formalization of human settlement and that people may have dignified places of stay. That therefore people can then realize their full potential and be agents of change positively in South Africa and in Africa all over. What we do to make sure that we strengthen our democracy in spite of the effect of the pandemic and other crises that happen out there, and thus ensuring that people might have a better life and a better chance to participate in changing society that they want to live in. And what we do to give people greater access to ICT, especially in this period of digitization, with the new ICT tools that can enable Ugo or a grandmother out there in Port St. John to transmit messages to their child or grandchild who has moved to Tabazimbi in Limpopo or has moved to China or to South Korea, so that they can have better communication and work with each other and assist each other. The tools that can enable us to teach kids that cannot cross the rivers because the rivers are flooded at some point. And what we do also to enhance the participation of women, who are more than half of our population. All of that will enable us to achieve the goal of a better life for all. It is not simply about tick boxing that we have implemented it. It is because in implementing these things, we assure ourselves of a chance to really leave a legacy worth living for the generations to come. Let me just remind everybody that the Atete people of Mozambique say, take care of the earth that you live in, not because it was handed down to you by your ancestors, no, but because it was lent to you by your great-grandchildren. You owe it to the children that are not yet born to make sure that we achieve everything, not in order just to conform to rules, but because we need to leave a mark in this society, because our grandchildren will say, Tatumlibo, Benezani Kunje, what did you guys do when you had a chance to change a life? one piece at a time. So I am very excited that there is an effort to do this, but we need greater social compact, greater partnerships between government, social partners. We need greater cohesion in order to do, and we need much better monitoring of what we are doing, including using that tool, which was in the statistics essay, which is called the goal checker, which checks what is being done on a monthly basis to achieve all these goals that we have set for ourselves. I wish us all luck as we do something to make a difference, because indeed, however long a log of wood stays underwater, it just does not become a crocodile. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
The road that we need to traverse, and I think everybody is quite happy. As usual, you are one of the best associate members of this legislature, Eastern Cape, and I think it is not far-fetched that we are going to honor you for every time of your availability when we are calling on your name. Thank you very much, and I think leaders that have been connected here now will know that the quality of life of the people of Southern Africa is important, of Africa, because of leadership. The impact, the improvement of quality of life is the essence, the better Africa. This is what I am from the issues that we have raised. Issues of trade, the ICT, enabling the rural women to be able to communicate with their children wherever they are in the continent, in the globe, in Johannesburg, connecting with Port St. John's. Leadership, worth leading. This is what you are now reincarnating in our minds to always think about. Thank you very much, Prof. And I think everybody is quite aware that the importance of this webinar, therefore, is hinged on those critical aspects. Now, we are informed that the Vice President of the CPA, who is also the Premier of the province of the Eastern Cape, is unable to make it here, but because of holding this important webinar very seriously, he decided to request the Honorable MEC responsible for sports, recreation, arts and culture, MEC Nongaba Konsiwe, just to make a presentation on progress on the implementation of resolutions taken from the 3 webinars and related government programs. Honorable Konsiwe, I am now inviting you to share the platform with Africa, with community of Commonwealth this morning, and I know that we are also joining you this afternoon in Makanda, Grahamstown, to commemorate this day. May I invite you, ma'am, you can show your face so that the face of the Eastern Cape in this webinar is represented by you, Ma'am Sutu. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning to you, Honorable Deputy Speaker and the Chair of the session. Good morning to the President, Honorable Helen Sauls-August, the Honorable members of this August House, and the leaders from the African countries and all the speakers. Good morning on this day, the Africa Day. It is really our honor as this team to be here. We really appreciate our provincial government is committed to scaling up our interventions of ensuring the full participation of women in our provincial economy. We will continue with our efforts of going beyond meeting our equity targets as it relates to the recruitment of women in senior management positions. We are rolling out development programs at the middle management level, and this gives us confidence that by the end of the term, all the departments would have reached their targets. It is worth to mention that a gender policy framework is in place to advance women's rights, and that the Office of the Premier also monitors the implementation of the HOD's 8-point plan for the HOD and municipal managers, which focuses on transformation of non-sexism, establishing policies inclusive environment, meeting equity targets, creating an enabling environment, gender mainstreaming, providing adequate resources and accountability and monitoring. The provincial government is rolling out an elaborate food security program that will ensure that our people work the land, feed themselves, and expand commercial opportunities where their scale of production allows. We are going to invest 45 million to support 22,620 vulnerable households, targeting women, youth, people with disabilities, and military veterans towards food security. As provincial government, we remain committed to the program of land reform. In 2022-23 financial year, government has redistributed 4,834 hectares of land to beneficiaries of Sarabatman District Municipality and Jogari District Municipality. They are receiving government support to be successful farmers. We remain committed to the provision of quality healthcare and education, such that we are collaborating with various sector education training authorities, SETA, private sector, National Youth Development Agency, and other role players to implement various education and skills development programs. These include bursaries, internships, learnerships, and other experiential learning opportunities. In response to the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide, the provincial government facilitated for the establishment of Provincial Forensic Laboratory. We are pleased to announce that the Forensic Laboratory is now operational and will improve our ability to resolve cases of gender-based violence and femicide. The province is working towards strengthening its international relations platforms that is yielding towards strengthened relations with the UN. This is evident on the UN's interventions during the recent impact of climate change, as unstable weather patterns have caused floods, droughts, and extreme hot and cold occurrences, wherein the UN provided access to mobile health services at the shelters, water, sanitation, and hygiene supplies were provided to the displaced families, including 123 children and 24 infants, and under the WASH, that is Water, Sanitation and Hygiene programs. UNICEF has provided critical supplies to more than 1,000 displaced people who are living in shelters. The province has made it a norm that all new government buildings built by this government are disability friendly and are accessible to persons with disabilities. A program to revamp all buildings which are not accessible to persons with disabilities is underway. And in 2022-23 financial year, we provided more than 22,000 assistive devices with an investment of more than 9.8 million. Furthermore, regular awareness campaigns on all disability types, for example, albinism awareness campaigns, deaf awareness campaigns, autism awareness campaigns are held in an attempt to educate communities on disability and related matters. The Eastern Cape Department of Health is committed to providing quality healthcare to people with disabilities. In 2022-23 financial year, focused training was conducted on cerebral palsy management, which was conducted for a total of about 72 therapists and their assistants. 48 were trained on basic wheelchair sitting and 32 with intermediate wheelchair sitting. The department has also made progress in the development of rehabilitation centers in the province, such as that of the specialized machinery for rehabilitation services to the value of 4.5 million, which was procured in 2022 financial year. The disability machinery is linked between government leaders to ensure that the disability sector is involved in decision-making processes. Government departments are mandated to implement the white paper on the rights of the people living with disabilities to ensure equity in employment and economic empowerment. The Constitution of South African law provides for acts such as the Children's Act 38 of 2005, Combating of Trafficking in Persons Act of 2013, Act number 7 of 2013, Marriage Act of 25, Act 1961, Sexual Offences Amendment Act of 2007, Section 15 Draft Prohibition of Forced Marriages and Child Marriage Bill. In an endeavor to strengthen the policies from remedial to preventative services, the Eastern Cape Department of Social Development, together with designated child protection organizations, continue implementing community-based prevention and early intervention services to families and communities. Family prevention, parenting programs, reunification services, reaching those who are in need. As such, a budget of 35.3 million has been set aside for childcare and protection services program for 23-24 financial year. The Office of the Premier has formed and is coordinating a research team that comprises of University of Fort Hare, Nelson Mandela Municipality University, Walter Sisulu University, Eastern Cape Legislature Research Unit, OTP Research Unit, and Commission for Gender Equality. The research team meets monthly. To date, the research projects have been identified and the draft research proposal has been developed and currently being reviewed by the team members. The province is making strides in strengthening of the partnership between the public and private sector, such that in the 2022 Provincial Investment Conference, 11 new investors with a combined value of 46 billion were announced. Of these newly announced investment projects worth 1.3 billion are underway, with 1.98 jobs created. The Department of Social Development in the province continues to provide sheltering services for victims of gender-based violence and femicide, trafficking in persons through our accredited one-stop centers and the accredited Kusaleka centers, wherein forensic social workers services as part of the criminal justice involvement, working with National Prosecuting Agency and the South African Police Services are provided. These services include ability to testify assessment, victim impact report, witness preparation and empowerment, court support and expert witnessing services. The Office of the Premier has adopted a whole-of-society approach in responding to the gender-based violence and femicide. All GBVF forums are formed of multi-stakeholders such as Rapid Response Team, Gender Machinery, Disability Machinery, Children Ambassadors, and Older Persons Forum. They all look at issues of gender-based violence and femicide, response and monitoring. Facilitation of campaigns such as 16 days of activism of no violence against women and children, that is from the 25th of November to the 10th of December, Elderly Abuse Day, the 15th of June, Child Protection Month, 29th May to the 5th of June. Government has put in place measures to address corruption by implementing a lifestyle audit and acting against officials implicated in acts of fraud and corruption. Revision of security architecture should encompass and be embedded on current 4IR as it applies to data protection and end-to-end encryption to eliminate espionage. Our province is anchored on transforming and growing the economy to include marginalized and excluded groups through various means, including mainstreaming of designated groups and broadening access to emerging technologies. One such intervention is our flagship broadband connectivity project, which is being rolled out currently throughout the province. To date, we have connected about 982 sites through the Broadband Initiative. Through partnerships with network service providers to expanding broadband coverage in rural communities, they have spent about 34 million connecting 23 villages, and they are now investing 71 million to connect 86 more villages by June this year. The provincial broadband projects continue to be rolled out to connect government sites, which includes schools, hospitals, and offices. It is through our investment on ICT infrastructure that we are now able to digitize operations in government. We are now have e-health, e-education platforms that have led to improved efficiency. We are constantly engaging the private sector to increase its investment in the province such that the sixth term of government has attracted cumulative investment totaling up to 171.5 billion for our province. The positive net effect of those investments has led to a continuing decline in the unemployment rate in our province. We should be clapping heads on these points, but because we are in this platform, then we can't. Otherwise, this is a milestone for the province. We are engaging the sector to invest more in skills development program in the province. Currently, there are only 5 sectors operating in the province out of 22. Our aim is to get over 20 young people trained in various skills to be ready for the labor market or to become entrepreneurs. We continue to strengthen our partnership with 4 universities in our province, with the intention of increasing intellectual capacity and having evidence-based decision-making grounded on pure research. And we are making several interventions, including providing students debt relief amount of 50 million for students in our 4 local universities. Again, this year we have invested another 50 million to assist the students who are in distress. The Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs reviews municipal spatial development frameworks for alignment with the provincial spatial development framework. One of the important aims of the provincial spatial development framework is to ensure spatial spread is attained to address the skewed development patterns of the past and to decongest urban and peri-urban centers that serve the development objectives of the province. Through the implementation and alignment to the provincial development plan, the provincial spatial development framework, including 2 sector plans, is to support integrated development plans and special development plans. Such delivery planning is covering rural areas development. What is of concern, though, is the implementability of such plans, given the vastness of the areas to be covered, the topography of rural areas, as well as the shrinkage of the fiscal space to deal with comprehensively with such spaces. It still requires better prioritization and the involvement of communities to draw on the competitive and comparative advantage in order to make inroads regarding development in those areas. According to guidelines for the development of integrated development plans, such as plans must be need-based, as well as linked and aligned to provincial plans as part of the bottom-up and top-down outlined in the government planning framework. Much of work needs to be done to ensure there is need-based approach coupled with an assess-based community development to support the development and implementation of such plans. In addition, there is much room for improvement to align intersphere plans. However, the introduction of District 1 plans, it is to service as a mechanism to close up the gap in terms of the alignment between various inter-specific plans. The provincial government of the Eastern Cape coordinates the implementation of the national policies, e.g. sector policies. Macro policies are developed at national level. Provinces therefore participate and influence the development